Hi, I'm Jacob Hornberger, Libertarian candidate for president, and I'm out in the woods here with my dog, who is actually my princess. And we're taking a hike in the woods, and I thought, well, I'll use this as an opportunity to share some thoughts with you, commentary on the presidential race, especially in the run-up to the Arizona Libertarian Party convention this coming weekend, where I'm sure a burning issue of that debate is going to be the subject of immigration. As I've stated at the very first of this campaign, immigration was going to be not only a burning issue in our nation, but also a defining issue in the presidential race and the nomination for the LP presidential nomination. And I think I've been proven right that clearly immigration is, if not the most defining issue of the race, is certainly in the top three. So the latest commentary by the immigration proponents, immigration control proponents, states that we need to be thinking about the fact that people are not going to take seriously anything an open borders candidate says with respect to other issues. Okay, this was a part of an advertisement that one of the candidates in the for the race, Michael Rectenwald, had put out in a commentary by one of his supporters, David Smith. And Dave is a good friend of mine. We've been friends for some time now, a few years, and he actually was one of my supporters and endorsers in the race 3 years ago for the LP presidential nomination. Cassie, no, come on back. No, stay here. Okay. Got my dog off leash. I'm not supposed to be doing that, but she's like a libertarian. She hates leashes. So in this commentary, Dave says, "Oh, people aren't going to take an open borders advocate seriously on other issues." And of course, he's referring to me, given that I'm the only open borders advocate in the race. But I want to address this point. For one thing, I find it kind of comical. I mean, because I'm thinking, what is he talking about? I mean, every libertarian advocate of immigration controls gets a 98 to 99% rejection rate among the American electorate. I mean, look, just going back in recent history, Jo Jorgensen, our presidential candidate 3 years ago, an immigration reform advocate, she got 1.1%. Then 1 year ago, Chase Oliver, who's vying for the nomination today in a race for U.S. Senate, immigration control advocate, advocates reform, streamline the system, etc., 2%. Mike Chermott, immigration control reformer, just 1 year ago in a race for Congress in the 20th Congressional District of Florida, less than 1%. And then we've got these two Wall Street Journal polls right now, one in September, one in December, that confirmed each other, that the American electorate say that they're going to vote against the Libertarian Party presidential candidate by a rate of 99%. And so, I mean, there's no question about the fact, as I've pointed out in other commentaries, that the race for the LP for the presidential election in 2024, insofar as the LP presidential candidate is concerned, is over. It's already been decided. I mean, if things haven't changed in the last 3 years, and if they haven't changed over the last few months, they're not going to change over the next 8 or 9 months. Why would people change their perspectives over the last 8 or 9 months? So we already know that the result is going to be 1%, the standard 1%, and maybe even less, because if Robert Kennedy Jr. gets on the ballot in all 50 states, which is likely, something that the Libertarian Party doesn't seem likely to do, you're looking at the very real possibility that that 1% will be less than 1%, and maybe even significantly less than 1%. But that's factoring in the standard Libertarian Party presidential candidate that people have come to expect from the Libertarian Party, who favors immigration controls and other aspects of our welfare state system. You know, like Social Security reform, Medicare reform, FDA reform, drug war reform, criminal justice reform, monetary reform. Okay? And so that is a 99% rejection rate. And as I've pointed out to convention after convention after convention, in which I will continue pointing out in every convention I'm appearing at, and there's a lot of them coming up, I'm with the 99%. I mean, I reject this message too. This reform-oriented Republican light message is a bad message, especially for a party that prides itself on liberty. Now, it's a popular message in the Republican Party, no question about it. But the Republican Party is not the Libertarian Party. But that brings us back to this notion of people aren't going to take an open borders advocate seriously on other issues. What do they mean by that? Well, because we need to break it down. That's the thing. They don't analyze that. They don't break down why this message garners this 99% rejection rate or 98% rejection rate, chronic rejection rate. Now, the standard explanation is, Jacob, we haven't gotten our message out. But that's clearly ridiculous because, and Chase Oliver and Mike Tremont proved that point, that Chase had in his race for Senate, if there's any libertarian that cannot say he didn't get his message out, it's Chase Oliver. He had like $20 or $30 million estimated of free advertising. Tons of publicity for his position. And he got into a debate with the incumbent U.S. Senator Raphael Warnock, where he set forth, he had half the time there because the Republican, Herschel Walker, didn't show up. So he had half the time there to explain his positions, and he did. So every single voter in Georgia knew what Chase's positions were, including immigration reform. And at the end of the race, even though he exhorted people, vote for me, 98% said no, 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 no. And the same with Mike Tremont. He got to the debates there. He got his message out, the same message that he has now, essentially the same message that Chase has, reform-oriented Republican life. At the end of the race, over 99% of the voters said no, 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 no. Now, what's going on here, you see? Because that's what we really need to analyze. And the answer comes actually in the political strategy, the target audience for Michael Rectenwald and Dave Smith, one of his supporters, and Michael Heiss, his campaign manager, as well as the other candidates in this race. That their target audience is Republicans. Okay, now you hear this from Michael Rectenwald, Michael Heiss. Then when they say, this is the party of Ron Paul, this is the party of Ron Paul, they're referring to the Libertarian Party. Now, when it comes to Ron Paul, everybody would have a difficult time matching me insofar as admiration for that man is. I consider Ron Paul one of my real-life heroes. I have the utmost admiration for him, and he knows it. We're good friends. Every year he invites me to deliver a speech at his foreign policy conference at Dulles Airport, and he pays me a fee. He's very kind, the Ron Paul Institute and Dan McAdams, but I do it for free. Don't tell them that, but or they know it. They know that I do it for free if they ask me to, because of the admiration that I have for Ron as well as Dan and the Ron Paul Institute. But the fact is, this is not the party of Ron Paul. The Republican Party was where Ron was when he was running for president and had that huge upsurge in votes, which excited libertarians everywhere because Ron philosophically is a libertarian. But he favors immigration controls, okay? Which is a popular position, in the Republican Party. And not all libertarians agree on everything. But that's where his support came from, inside the Republican Party. So the fantasy has always been, and continues to be, that the Ron Paul voters are going to cross party lines and they're going to come and join us libertarians. They're going to support our presidential candidate, which is ludicrous. It's been a ludicrous fantasy from the beginning. Because it's just not going to happen. People are not going to cross party lines en masse to come over here and vote for a Libertarian Party presidential candidate. If they were going to, Joe wouldn't have gotten 1.1%. She'd have gotten 10 to 15 to 20% if all those Ron Paul voters came over. So that strategy that's based on this is the party of Ron Paul is a fallacious strategy. But that's what they mean when they say that people won't take seriously an open border advocate. They're thinking of the Ron Paul voters that they're targeting. Well, and they're right. No Republican was going to take anything seriously by a libertarian open borders advocate. Okay? But who cares? You see, they care, but I don't care. In fact, when I ran for U.S. Senate 22 years ago in Virginia, 2002, I didn't give a hoot what Republicans thought of me. I was calling for open borders, eliminating Social Security and Medicare immediately, getting rid of public schooling, legalize all drugs. And my opponents in the party who were just getting started, the right-wingers, the right-wing oriented people that had come in from the Republican Party and were trying to move the Libertarian Party in the direction of the Republican Party, they were mocking me and ridiculing me because Harry Brown in the 2000. Wait a minute. Oh, my dog wants to go. I'm sitting here on a bench, so I'm going to start walking here. Harry Brown had just gotten 0.03% in the presidential race. He had a plan to reform Social Security or save Social Security. He didn't come out in favor of open borders. He originally called for abolishing the income tax and replacing it with a sales tax or a flat tax. Can't remember which one. But anyway, he ends up with 0.03%. So here I am calling for open borders and eliminating all socialism from America, including immigration socialism and the Social Security, public schooling, etc., and Medicare. And so they were certain, my opponents in the party, the right-wing oriented people, the reform-oriented people who just were dead set on moving the Libertarian Party in the direction of the Republican Party, were convinced that I would get less than Harry Brown. Well, and I ended up with 7% of the vote. Not 0.07, 7% with these positions. It was a bare bones campaign. I didn't have any money, but it was the power of the message that generated some 107,000 or 106,000 votes. Now, people say, well, a Democrat wasn't running. Irrelevant. No Democrat was going to vote for me. I'm calling for the end of public schooling. I'm not even calling for vouchers. No Democrat would ever vote for a voucher proponent. Imagine abolishing public schooling, abolishing Social Security and Medicare. No Democrat was going to vote for me. I didn't give a hoot about them either. But I suspected that there was a large group of people out there that are not members of the party, okay, but that love our principles, our radical principles. And I proved it with the 7% vote. So my point is that this message has power. That, like I've always said, our principles are our greatest asset. They're not liabilities. They're not negatives. Unless you're trying to target the Ron Paul voters. If you're trying to target the Ron Paul voters, Republicans, yeah, it's a negative. But you're not going to get those votes anyway. We already know that. They're not going to come over and vote. It's a fallacious political strategy. Now, here's another factor involved in this. Who they're really targeting, if you break this analysis down even further, they're targeting the people that are well-to-do, middle class, upper middle class, and wealthy. And in this regard, which are Republicans, duh. Here's what also motivates them to target this kind of audience, and that is if you go to a Libertarian Party convention, and I've been going to conventions since 1990. You'll notice one thing about the demographics, that the party consists, the conventions consist almost entirely, like 98% or 99%, maybe sometimes 100% of white, middle class, or upper middle class or wealthy people. Okay? You never see poor people at a Libertarian Party convention. You hardly ever see any racial minorities. And so the natural inclination is, well, if we believe this way, our counterparts in society will feel this way too. And so we have to target them, our middle class, upper middle class, and wealthy, for votes. But it's a fallacious reasoning, because most of those people are not going to achieve the breakthrough that the rest of us have achieved. It's just not going to happen. And why is that? Okay, well, if you look at like inflation, it has adversely affected everyone, okay? But the middle class and the upper middle class and the wealthy can adjust. They can cut out 2 movies a month, or they can get fewer car washes for their Cadillacs or Lexuses. Okay, so they can adjust, but they're never going to accept the radical change that is involved in genuine libertarianism. The libertarianism that I'm advocating, okay? That's genuine libertarianism. Nobody questions that. My opponents have never said Jacob's advocating non-libertarian positions. No, their attacks are, he's advocating libertarian positions. That's what they consider as a problem. But that group of people is never going to go for radical change. Never. They're too comfortable in American society. They don't want radical change. This is why they fear us libertarians. But people in the bottom half of the economic ladder, they don't have that same fear, because they're the ones getting crunched by the system. They can't adjust. They're living from paycheck to paycheck. They're barely making it. They can't cut out 2 movies because they don't go to the movies at all. Okay? They don't have Cadillacs and so forth. They're the ones that are receptive to our message. And I saw this when I ran for U.S. Senate 20 years ago. 3 years ago, when I was running for the party's nomination, I ran an active campaign in North Carolina. And I went to the bus station to pass out campaign cards in Raleigh. And at the bus station, this was the poorest of the poor. I mean, these were predominantly blacks that were going to work on the bus. And you could tell they were poor. And so I engaged them in conversation. I sat there and said, hey, tell me what your analysis of things are in America. And it was fascinating. They had without exception, they had a better grip on what's going on in this country than your average white middle class or upper middle class or wealthy person in Raleigh or anywhere else for that matter. I mean, they talked about the racket of the military-industrial complex, the racket of the drug war, the whole massive racket of the government. There was no trust in the government. That's our voters right there, you see. But if you're targeting Republicans for votes, you're not going to get those votes because they're going to see you as just part of that system. Let me give you another example of this fallacious political strategy. Chase Oliver, okay? Chase, great guy. Everybody likes Chase, okay? But go look at the debate that he was in with Raphael Warnock. Just Google debate, Senate, Georgia, Warnock, Oliver. And it's really worth watching because it's instructive. In the middle of the debate, Chase let it be known. He says, I want your votes. Come and vote for me. Because he says, I will be a better proponent of small government and lower taxes than Herschel Walker. Wow. You see, what he's saying is, I will do a better job promoting Republican principles or mantras like small government and lower taxes, which is a classic Republican mantra, okay? And he'll do a better job of that than the Republicans. So he was clearly exhorting Republicans to vote for him instead of Herschel Walker. And the rest of the positions during that debate reflect that. He called for reform of the FDA, not abolition of the FDA, which I favor. In fact, I favor the whole separation of healthcare in the state. That's the case I would have made during that debate. But he didn't want to offend those Republican voters who would be shocked at somebody advocating the reform of the end of the FDA. They want reform. That's why Chase favors school vouchers. Don't make the radical case of abolishing public schooling. Just settle for vouchers, which is very popular within the Republican Party. Or Chase didn't call for drug legalization when given the opportunity. He said he wanted to repeal mandatory minimum sentences, which is an acceptable position among many Republicans. Just like asset forfeiture laws and so forth, but certainly not legalization of drugs, man. I mean, that would knock him out of the ballpark in terms of vote getting in the Republican Party. So it's just this notion of going after Republicans that is the fallacious strategy that this party's presidential candidates have used for many, many years now. Take Lars Mapstead. Lars, another great guy. Can't help but like Lars. But here he is, the centerpiece of his campaign. And the centerpiece of his campaign, if he's made the nominee, is to abolish the income tax and replace it with a huge, enormously large sales tax of like 18 to 23%. Imagine the message that would send to people at the bottom of the economic ladder, that we're going to help the rich, the well-to-do, the upper middle class with abolishing the income tax. But yeah, sorry, we're going to saddle you poor people with this heavily regressive sales tax. I mean, that would be just, now, would that garner favor in the Republican Party? Oh my gosh, they would love it. I mean, to exempt the rich from the income tax, but to throw the sales tax burden, or the tax burden for the welfare state on the poor. Oh, Republicans would love it. But imagine the message that sends out to people in the lower half of the economic classes in America. I mean, to me, it's just a huge negative. So this strategy, to me, is based on a fallacious notion. And that notion is that Republicans will come and vote for libertarians. It's never going to happen. I hold that there is a group of people out there that will vote for our principles, just like they did for me in 2002, that love our principles but will never vote for a reform-oriented Republican-like presidential candidate running as a libertarian because it's not worth it to them. They'd rather sit at home. They see that candidate just part of the system. But given an opportunity to vote for somebody that says we're going to dismantle this tyrannical system entirely, no exceptions, 100%, open borders, abolish socialism, get rid of this whole thing, get rid of the Federal Reserve and have a free market monetary system, no monetary reform, and get rid of this racist war on drugs, which is the most racist government program since segregation. That's what will bring us the 10 to 15% breakout that everybody wants. Now, I shouldn't say everybody. There's people that are happy with the 1%, and they measure their excitement over 0.01 increments. You're like, 1.1, oh, Jacob, we're second greatest achievement in LP history. This is fantastic. Or 1.2 and 1.3. And, well, to me, that's not a winner mentality. I'm talking about a major breakout of 10 to 15%. And I'm saying that adherence to our principles, no exceptions, just moving in a dramatically different direction, completely new direction, in the direction that restores our founding principles of libertarianism in this party. That's what will achieve this breakout of 10 to 15% that I think most of us would be pretty excited about. But most important, as I've said before, our job in this party is to lead America to freedom. People are yearning for answers. There's a large number of people out there that don't like the death and the suffering that comes from immigration controls, this socialist system. And that's what it is. It's a system of socialist central planning. That's what the cause of the crisis. Not open borders like they say. It's that their police state has failed. And it is a police state. And the worst thing this party could ever do is to move in the Republican camp and copy the Republicans on this position and get on their same page and become an endorser of a police state. A police state is the exact opposite of a free society. And so if we run a campaign based on pure principle, now we're moving in a completely different direction. And that's the best chance we have, not only to achieve this major breakout in votes of some 10 to 15%, but it also is the best chance we have to lead America to freedom. I'm Jacob Hornberger, Libertarian candidate for president. My campaign website is jacobforliberty.com.